Welcome. Good morning. Good afternoon for some. Good morning for others. Kelly Nazat here, and we are wrapping up the air realm. So we're in the third part of air, the final phase of air, if you will, and we've now gone for 12 solid weeks. 3 weeks for each of the four elements, and this is the final week for our final element, bringing it all together. So it's kind of exciting. I wondered how this journey would have ended, or how it would have gone from the very beginning, and now I've got a really good sense of it. Good morning, Dee Dee. Good morning, Audrey. So yeah, final air realm. I just got back from a nice run. It was one of the first days we've had here where the air was actually warm enough to go for a nice run without it being, full on gear. And it's amazing the change in attitude with the change in the air, the change in the conditions, right? When the conditions outside are really nice, everyone that you meet on the path is smiling and happy. And when it's cold and blustery, everyone's sort of hunkered down and introverted and kind of just trying to drive through the experience. So it kind of reminded me of this final phase of air, because this is, this is what it leads to in terms of the element air. If we look at air from an intellectual perspective, from a developmental perspective, like developing our mind so that we can think our way through our life, our world, in a really good way, the air realm is the mutable point, the place where we should be looking for transformations to occur. The first part of air is really just kind of getting our grounding and finding our way into the world. Good morning, Jen. And the middle of the air realm is, we're forming relationships, and we're forming community, and we're forming our groups and gathering together. And as I look at this more from an organic perspective, which is what the alchemists did, we're looking at the dynamics of the elements. So if you're just simply focusing on the nature of air itself, from the polar sides of air, you have very stagnant air, right? Air that feels compressed, and then you have very expansive air. Hope that didn't mess it up. Excuse me, I just came from a run. There's stiff breezes, and then there's massive spiraling hurricanes. So I'm looking at the nature of air as I go through this in my own experience, as the alchemists did. They watched the elements very carefully to take their cues from the elements, because as we're finding out more and more, we are an expression of the elements, a rather elaborate expression of the elements, but an expression nonetheless. As trees root down and rise up and branch out, so do we in our own way, in a more kind of metaphorical or mental sense. So in this final phase of air, this whole spiral process was something that I had been exploring while I was in grad school for many, many years, before I got a lot of really great insights in terms of development, and how the alchemy of development, if you will, how it all worked together and correlated. And I started to see it in all these different theorists talking about how we develop ourselves. And all of them, whether they knew it or not, on some level were talking in these spiral dynamics. They were talking in an elemental way as well. Because if you're in this on a full level, you have to own the importance of our emotional body. You have to own the importance of being embodied in a physical body. You have to own the energy body, the spiritual body, and the mental body. So at some point, whether they do it awkwardly or not, they're they're forced to address all these different sides of our nature. And one of the challenges that I saw was how to kind of grok it all and bring all the elements into some kind of cohesive pattern. And so as I started formulating my own way to bring it all together with all these developmentalists, plus all the work I've studied with more ancient cultures or more earth-centric or elemental cultures, traditions, how do they all come together? I started to see them in this model, and what I needed to do beyond just kind of getting a feel for it, kind of having a sense of these dynamic movements, right, was I needed to go and study the developmentalists. I needed to go look at all the models that came before. There are many codified processes that have been well documented, from science to mysticism. And as you start to look into them, each one of them can be overwhelming in their seeming novelty or complexity. It can be very challenging to take it all together. And one of the things I noticed in my practice, well, actually more in my training, was it was a real challenge to take the knowledge that I gained from the more esoteric side of the world, right, the more metaphysical part of the world that I had, relatively later in life. I think I was like 19 or so when I really got into it. I started to see the value because it really reflected these things I was seeing in the world naturally. And so, like, studying Carl Jung, I was studying somebody that already had, in a certain sense, codified these processes. He went through the hard work of building this, right? So when I'm reading his work, I'm reading him at the pinnacle of his success, where he's bringing it all together. And what it does for me is it gives me this opportunity as a younger person, to look at my own experience and look at how he's portraying it, and then saying, well, this is very similar to what I'm experiencing. And so he's not only giving me a lexicon or vernacular for explaining this or talking about it with other people, he's also offering a bit of a emerging system in which to understand it myself, and which to communicate it with other people so that I can grow and advance. So much of the air realm is, as I see it, is around this next level. First level air, how do you relate to other people? How do you do this? What's behind the patterns you relate to other people? Is it informed by something from the earth realm that really reflects you in the water and fire realm? Or is it just sort of more unconscious interactions? For myself, of course, I can see, just like all of us, I suppose, is that I have both. And I'm trying to, bring one up and reduce the other, so that I'm more conscious in the way that I relate to others. I learn from my mistakes, as we all do. I find myself reacting to somebody. And I think as long as we're being authentic, right, and allowing ourselves to be authentic, we can go through these experiences and then learn from them. And then that is a part of the our evolving mental nature. We learn, we think things through, we watch, the dynamics play out, and we say, well, I thought that would go over well with my friends or with my community, and it didn't do so well. So maybe I need to shift. Now, if you're wise about it, you will go to your community and then ask for insight and information, right? So someone like Tim Ferriss is a great example of a great air realm person, where he wants to do something. He has this fiery inspiration to do something, and in a certain sense, he goes straight to the air realm and he just does it. But the way he does it, there is some underlying organization to that for him, in that he goes to the best people that he can find, the people at the top of their field, and then he asks them for wisdom. He could easily just simply ask his buddies or his friends who are in the same situation or are not even close to his level of success, and he could say, what do you think about this? And I'm assuming he does. But where the success lies is in going to these mentors, going to these teachers, these awakeners. So I see the upper air realm as finally getting to that point where we found how we relate to each other. We're waking up in the way we relate to the world and the way we're imposing how we're motivated, how we're imposing what we want to create in the world. We're learning more about those dynamics. We're learning from others. We're improving the way we relate to each other. A beautiful thing. And, for some of us, developing our abilities to work within a group dynamic is a new thing. And we're learning how to be in a group environment, not just one-on-one. So through the whole course of this, there is this mirroring going on, this back and forth, that is very much guided by this need to find balance between your motivations, your needs, your desires, and the world around you, how to find that harmony and balance between the two, right? Whether it's with you and another person or you and a collective group, no matter how big or small it is, we're trying to find our way of being. That's a really important part of it. So we have this, sorry, someone keeps clicking in. We have this movement, and in the astrological, as I started, I think maybe 4 years ago, I started adding the astrological, or finding how weaving it in to this spiral model. And not only did it fit perfectly, but it took it to a whole nother level. That's what I love about this work. The more people that you work with, the more systems that are relevant and that have been well thought out, they take what you already know to a whole new level. For me, that's very, very important. It's great to have a sense of reality. We all have a history, we all have experiences, but if we kind of stuck with that little core bit of wisdom and saying, well, this is my, Bollywood, this is my world, this is what I'm going to stick with, we become quickly sort of, outdated in a sense. That every cell has to be part of an ongoing exchange with the world around it. So, in the middle of the air realm is about groups and about creating a new tribe in new ways. The upper realm, if you can almost imagine like a tree growing out of the ground, the beginning part, the first part of Earth, and that they say in astrology, the Libra part, where we're learning how we're relating to the world, is really kind of like a bamboo shoot, and it's growing, but it's just getting its rooting and branches and the rest. And then in the middle phase of it is where, if it were a fruit tree, it would be starting to bear fruit. That now you're able to relate to others in a way that's actually fruitful and generative and good. Well, the upper phase of it, as I'm walking through the woods and I'm looking at the trees, every tree is trying to find its open spot of sunlight, its connection with source, right? Every one of them is trying to weave their way in, and it's not always pretty, but they do find their way to come to some branch out and reach up to something where they have their own piece of the sky. And I do see this a lot in the air realm, just, the dynamics of it. It almost has that feeling from a psychological sense or a mental cognitive sense where we're building our own ivory towers, right? We're building our own towers of wisdom where we kind of rise above the everyday mundane, and we get the more we develop, the more information turns into wisdom, knowledge turns into wisdom. The more we do that, the more we get to these higher states where we kind of, find ourselves rising up. And it also can be kind of it's a place where, it's a natural spiraling up pathway. All the trees, every being does it, it seems. So there's this dual nature to it. There's this rising for, to find your place in the sky. And then there's the other side of it, which is really being mindful of, once you're up here, you get the meta view, you get a much bigger view of the world from this higher state of being. And there comes a level, I think the mutable or the transformational phase of this, once you get a certain level of wisdom or a certain level of insight, it becomes more and more apparent how important it is that we do things in a good way, that we do things in a way that's in harmony with the world around us, that's in resonance with all that we know that we're surrounded by. So there's this duality, right? There's this kind of personal, egoic energy trying to look for this perfect future. But at the same time, there's this wisdom that says, yeah, but I've gone through those pathways, right? I've pushed through egoically in the wrong ways far enough times where I could know that the outcome is not always generative unless I take into consideration the world around me. So there is this real kind of culmination of knowledge to wisdom there. And in that there, in this realm it's really looking at growth and expansion. Just like the trees are growing and expanding, we too are kind of, as we gather insights from the field around us, from all beings, all our relations, from the environment, from the news, from history, from speculating about the future, and all these different areas of our matrix, of our existence, we're taking in all this wisdom, and it is, in its own way, integrating into the way we present ourselves to the world. Children don't necessarily have that advantage. As I see, they can be very willful and pushy, and they're very immediate. And while this work is very much about always being very immediate, there is a difference between being immediate and ill-informed or uninformed about the environment, and being immediate yet immersed in this field that one has explored very deeply and very broadly and on a very high level. One can be more immediate and enter into this really wonderful state of flow, like Csikszentmihalyi talks about, where a violinist or a pianist or a basketball player, someone that is performing at such a high level that it feels like they're just being taken with the wind by this muse that's going through. So much of this work is about being able to direct our energy, being able to it's like, I think of like a stagecoach with the horses, right? Being able to guide our will in a way that we're directing it in a good way that's going into the world and doing good things. So there's this, much like the nervous system does, there's this need to constantly direct and organize our experience, our energy in a way that's actually working well for all beings, creating harmony and balance in the world. So with this air realm we're finally in, we have one more week, and the final week, the 13th week, will be the final element, and we'll just have one week of that, and it's a week of the ether realm. So in this model, the fifth element being the ether realm really is about the center of the spiral. It's about the soul as a whole being, as a manifest part of our nature between our spiritual being and our physical being, wedded into this conscious being. And it is that part of us that is experiencing all the elements simultaneously as one experience of a life. So from this place we get both the big view, and we also get the whole view, right? We really kind of see everything coming together as a whole. The air realm is what's helping us to get to that higher level, to get to that level of meta view, meta perspective, where we can rise up out of the earth level where everything's so immediate and rise up to this level where we see a bigger picture. So one of the, in the Native American medicine wheel, this might be considered the north for the directions, the place of the white buffalo or white owl. And in the north is a place of completions and new beginnings. So there's always this cycling into these new stages, these new phases of life. And I love this part of the air realm. When I'm working with clients here, they're generally they're more advanced. They've been in their practices for quite a while. So they have a wealth of insight and information and wisdom, primarily. Well, and insight and wisdom are, very important in this area. So it gives them a kind of rarefied understanding of their field, of their life, of their experiences. and working with them on maybe on introducing some novel approaches to doing journey work or energy work or any of that. There is a difference in the way that it's brought in, because it can be easily brought into a bigger meta view. And so this is kind of a place to seek out, a place to advance to, and a place that is very much a sought after place. On the other side of it, there is this sort of, dance between the needs of the ego again and the needs of the community. We get into, as they say in astrology, we get into this place where we're dealing with more codified processes and systems. The actual systems that have culminated from these gatherings. A religion is simply the culmination, the codified culmination of some prophet or some seer or some healer that attracted enough people to create a group, into a cult, into a minor religion, into a religion itself. So as we get in through the air realm, we're actually building we're building our own systems. Each of us has those systems. So there is a dance there between having a meta view, having your wonderful position and place in it all, and also the balancing act of being too high in the air, too disjointed from the world below. So as everything, there's shadow sides and there's challenges, and one of them would be simply the ability to, once you've gotten to the certain level in your profession or in your life, that you're willing to kind of, have beginner's mind and starting over again, right? So that's an interesting juxtaposition there. So much of this is about being conscious of what's motivating you. Especially when you get to the point where things are working really well for you and things are going in a great direction. Being conscious of your motivations means that you're thinking on a higher level other than self-motives. You're thinking on a level that takes into consideration not only what's going to work for you, but really what is needed from you in terms of actions and engagement that actually makes the world a better place. And so that's where we are with the air realm. Now, in alchemy, there are two phases. There's a spiraling. So we've made a complete circle. We started with fire, went all the way down to water, earth, and then came back, and we're back up in air again. And if you just look at it this way, it's a circle, right? It's just a synthesis of the elements. But what we're looking for in the center of that circle is the self, the fifth element, right? And so in this work, what we really want to do is spiral into that center. So we're not way out into the fire, way out into the water, way out deep into the earth or high up in the air, but it becomes more refined, where we're getting to this center where it's that place where it seems like we're not moving far into any of the elements, but they're all being integrated. So they talk about in alchemy two levels of sublimatio, which is the movement of the air realm. And the first phase is this big, broad movement out into the world to build yourself, to build your profession, to build your body of wisdom or knowledge, and to really kind of position yourself as a doctor or this or that, as a mother, or whatever it is. You've kind of positioned yourself in this. The spiral's always asking us to refine it down and not be so far out there in any of the elements. So it's about coming in further into the center. And when, as Carl Jung said, when you keep your eye on your center, there's always going to be that truing towards the center. You're not going to be spiraling out in your head or in your fantasies or in your emotional self or in your physical issues. You're going to always be kind of refining back to that central line. It may look more like the pathway of a labyrinth, probably, but ideally this is simply, an ideal sort of way to navigate through it and see where you're at. So I really like this realm. We'll go into the ether realm for a week and really just explore what it means to be whole and have all the elements. One of the meditations that I use for this part is I imagine myself sinking down from where I'm at now. So I'm sitting in this chair in my office, and I imagine simply just going down to the core of the earth. And when I'm in the core of the earth, as I am now, I'm able to touch, the entire globe all around, like that. So I can touch, the North Pole. I can touch Antarctica. I can touch, Australia. Any place. In other words, it's when you are in the center, everything is immediately accessible. Even what's behind you, in front of you, or inside, above, below, everything becomes accessible because you're in the center of it. And so that meditation is a really wonderful thing, because then you can start getting a view from this place, almost a cellular-like view of the entire planet as a whole. There no longer tends to be these, these global partitions, right? It's all one thing. There's land, there's water, there's air, there's, the sun above is moving, everything's moving. And so you get a different view of it. And it's a great place to hang out for a while. If you've never done it, I would definitely encourage taking 15 minutes or more and just sinking down to the core of the earth and being there. And, a lot of the air realm is about integrated thinking. And by that, I see it as being able to receive, to breathe it in, to let it come to you in a very Zen-like way. Let the world bathe over you, bathe to you, kind of spiral into the center where you are. And also there is the transmission of sending out the signals in response. So in a Taoist way, we would breathe in the world, and from all around. We'd breathe it in as light. We'd breathe it right into our core and spiral it into our belly, into our core. And then we think love and joy and kindness and courage and all these wonderful virtues, and we'd infuse that energy with our higher aspirations. And then with that, we would send that infused energy out into the world through all of our cells in all directions, like a dandelion flyer, all around us, back out until it reaches the void in all directions, the multiverse. And we breathe it back in. So there's this inhalation, and then there's this exhalation. And that in many ways sums up the relationship of the upper air realm, this high level relationship, this engagement with the meta, with the big world, the big picture. It both reaches to the smallest atoms, to the most local experiences, and also to the most global and universal, all is one experience, which is an incredible thing. From that place, right, you can come back up to the surface from the center of the earth, and you can imagine going to the sun and finding yourself in the center of the sun. And see the planets spiraling around, the nebula, the galaxy swirling, seeing yourself as a sun spiraling around the galaxy, around in the universe. And from this perspective, you can drill in and just see the local planets, right? And you could see them interacting. You could fast forward, you could slow it down, you could reverse it. But from this place, if you just let it be, there's some amount of wisdom that comes through that comes from being receptive. We spend so much time with these projective models that we start imposing reality on reality, which means we're creating false realities. When, in fact, as a scientific measure, we should be more in the receptive mode than the projective mode. So when I find myself on any planet, or imagine going into any of these realms, I do it as a meditation, but I also do it as an opportunity to experience something I didn't know before. It's the same with all journeys, right? When we journey into the inner worlds, we're really journeying to learn what we haven't learned before. We go to other lands to see what we haven't seen, to experience what we haven't experienced before. The imaginal realm is very much that way. The air realm might be more of a kind of, high level Zen meditation, yet it still carries a lot of the energies of the shamanic from a very earthy level, reaching to these upper levels, meeting with upper level guides or meeting with upper level energies, higher level energies, is just another stratosphere of what we work with all the time. So all is connected in that way, right? Hey, Matt. So that's where it is with the air realm. For the rest of the week, you'll see that we'll bring in memes and insights that are going to reflect more kind of the idea of how do we find our place in community, how do we find ourselves, our power within these systems, these power structures, right? That's a big issue. I mean, it's something we're all facing, and I don't think there are no coincidences. So I know that there is a soul journey in all of this beyond the chaos and the degradation in it. What are we doing in terms of how do we adapt to this ever-changing environment, especially as we see these old systems fail, these old codified processes of communicating are falling apart. We're looking at, if this is about communication, I mean, look, fake news, all of these wonderful things are coming out where they're kind of eating each other now. We all knew much of it was fabricated and manufactured to begin with, but there is this whole other level of kind of self-reflective, right? I think in astrology, this is actually the area of Gemini as well. So Gemini is this kind of reflective aspect as well. So we're seeing all of this stuff happening around us. We're seeing old reliable systems falling apart. And what I love about this work is the invitation that I had when I first started learning it was that we need to start creating systems that allow us to navigate uncertain territory, uncharted territories or environments. And spiral dynamics are really the dynamics of transformation. They're moving from one state to another. Everything spirals when they're in transition. Light, wind, everything does. So when you look at this work and when you follow through, we're going to go back again through the whole 13-week process again in a couple weeks. And the opportunity to kind of revisit these aspects of your life, as you look at them again and again, you'll see that there's a refining going on. Even though you might not notice how exactly that happens, there is always a refining. As we visit these areas of our experience, a refining process occurs. And that's part of the blessing of just being present, but it's also part, Jen says, Gemini is able to grok a little about a lot. Kinetic dynamic energy. The shadow of Gemini is a psychopomp trickster. Huh, I like that. Well, I know a little bit about that shadow, and the psychopomp trickster. So how do we do this in a good way? If we're looking at, bringing new tribe together, bringing ourselves together, we're all doing our job to individually rise to the surface and go to a really good level, right? But we've all been sort of like, in our own little worlds. And it's been challenging for us to figure out how to come to a more webbed collective, a webbing of integrated support with each other to hold space for what's coming. I love that term again, holding space, because something is coming through. We know that. That's what we are all aware of, and we're wanting to be more a part of that. So in this place is really an open question, an open dialogue. How do we create these new collectives? How do we hold space that these new collectives will come through, informing us in the mystery of it all as it does happen? So I'm going to continue holding space for that to come through. We're, as I was saying before, we're developing a platform so that it's not just memes running on a vertical rat wheel, right? It'll be more spread out. So you can really dive in to each of the 12 areas or 13 areas, and you can add to these areas as well. We need a way to start holding space that others can come in and inform us from different traditions, different backgrounds, different beliefs, in a way that we're speaking to what we share in common. And I think you know, for my part, I think that's a big part of what this new collective can be, is a place to share from what we have in common rather than what makes us stand out. When we share from a place, from a heartfelt place of peer-to-peer sharing, like sharing traveler's notes, there's something that happens there that keeps intact this mutual respect that says, I see you. I know you have a lot of wisdom. You've been through a lot. It's beautiful what you've been through. What you have to offer me is extraordinary. And what I would like to offer you is coming from my heart. It's coming from my hard experiences and the rest. And this is really, you know, something that I think if we can engage it in this way, we will have an opportunity to really learn what it is to be in a collective that is sharing from a place of mystery, that is sharing from a place of wisdom, that is sharing from a place, as it is in this air realm, a place of transcendent wisdom that is borrowing us as receivers and transmitters of this wisdom to come through us. So I invite all of you to keep moving through this and to share what your experiences are as you will, and I hope that this, if nothing else, that this begins the conversation of how do we share across our platforms. You might be a naturopath, you might be a clinical therapist, you might be a housewife with a healer, a mother. How do we bring all of these points of wisdom together that we share with each other, rather than just sharing general information that anybody can find on the internet from the regular sources, whether it's Deepak Chopra or some other guru or so. How do we share amongst each other the wisdom that we've gained from our unique perspective? I know for myself in my practice, it's something that I haven't had a whole lot of experience with. And I have a lot of friends, but we're all working very hard. The point we might share about clients, we might share a little bit about, our daily lives, our challenges. But the one thing that, most of us seem to be challenged with is how do we share across our experiences in a way that we can learn from each other? And I think that's a very important question at this point, because I think it's part of whatever that is, whatever that answer is, I think it's part of the answer to what's coming through us and what this new system will be like that is informing us. So I hope that this early attempt to create this conversation around the elements for this 13-week period has bared some fruit and has created some insights, some ideas, and I look forward to advancing it and taking it to the next level and finding ways of having collaborative communications with you guys where we form more of a collective field of wisdom and insight. In the meantime, I will be blabbing away as I do, because I love this work. It's what I do. And I will keep refining and spiraling in, hopefully, not spiraling out, occasionally spiraling out, of course, but mostly spiraling in, so that I get to this place, we get to this place where we really are taking our work to a higher level, and we're creating something beyond what we were taught, so that we have something to offer to the next 7 generations, so that we become conduits for this wisdom coming through in a way that only a collective can. I think this is a perfect time. The ideal for me is SETI, right? SETI, S-E-T-I, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. And SETI is doing amazing work, and they have for a long time. And I remember when I was in grad school, they had started this program where they were searching for extraterrestrial, but they knew that they didn't have a mainframe big enough. Right? They could not build a computer big enough. So what they did was they spread it out to personal computers. And all of my friends had a little piece of SETI information discovering the heavens, right? So you have this amazing, what do you call it, amazing networking going on. There must be a really great title for that, and I'm sure there is, but I don't know it. Where we are, we're little nodules in this webbing, or this, universal nervous system. And if we're connected, we're sharing that information in real time with each other. I mean, that's at some point going to happen. We're going to be able to do it with all of the clunky, without all the heavy clunkiness of words and the rest. We'll be able to communicate this information much more quickly, so we're all up-leveled much more quickly, spiraling into a quicker way. But in the meantime, we're looking at ways of creating this Soul Lab community so that we can start something that we can all fractal out into these generative groupings where we're all connected and all supporting each other. And that's my great adventure for this. So I'm looking forward to what can happen here. And a big part of the success of this is the support, the resources in terms of information, insight, and your wisdom and your life, what you bring to it, your unique vision, what's inside of you that is extraordinarily unique, that needs to come forward anyway. But as you share it in a collective that really does get you, that supports you, and that honors what you bring to the collective, that's where I think things can exponentially grow. So thank you guys for taking this journey with me, especially those of you who have been here the whole way through. It's been quite an adventure, and I have definitely gone through a lot of changes because of it. And I look forward to expanding it and moving forward with it. So thank you guys, and keep in touch. And for the rest of this week, it's Air 3, it's high-level communication, intellectual integration, all that good stuff. So thank you very much. Love you guys, and I will talk to you soon. Have a great day. Bye.